Hello, my name is Jessica, and my favorite thing continues to be travel.
Welcome to the Finding Favorites podcast, where we explore your favorite things without using an algorithm. Here's your host, Leah Jones.
Hello and welcome back to Finding Favorites. I'm your host, Leah Jones. It is Sunday, June 26th, and I'm happy to be back on the mic with you. Man, what a hard week. What a hard last few days that we've had on this week. The Supreme Court overthrew gun safety legislation, access to healthcare and healthcare privacy by overturning Roe v. Wade, some rights of religious freedom, public schools. It's just been a real hard week in the United States. And that's just, the top few reasons. But this weekend was also in Chicago, the Pride Parade. Last weekend was the Pride Festival. So, Pride started with a protest in Stonewall, and I am hopeful that the fighting spirit, fighting for ever-expanding freedom and access and choice, is something that we have in us as a silent majority in America. In my own life, I have been going every week in June. I've had a different test as my doctors try to get to the bottom of the reason why I have had a harder time bouncing back from chemotherapy than most people who take Taxol. The current suspicion is that I have MS, that people with the uveitis, which is my eye thing, 12% of people with uveitis go on to have multiple sclerosis. So I have had in the last couple of weeks a spinal tap, a brain MRI, a brain CAT scan, and something called an evoked potential. So I've been through the ringer. Friday was also my first anniversary of being diagnosed with breast cancer. To be a year into it and not feel like I'm done, is certainly not what I expected a year ago. A year ago, I was diagnosed with breast cancer, and then my dad and I went on a road trip. And most of the time that we were in New York, I was in my room on the phone with nurse navigators at different hospitals trying to figure out what my next few months would look like. And my initial understanding of my cancer treatment was that I would have a lumpectomy, 3 weeks of radiation. I'm like, it might all be done by Rosh Hashanah. And that was not the case. By Rosh Hashanah of that year, I don't even think I'd had my first surgery. Maybe I'd had the lumpectomy, but I hadn't had the oncoplasty. I'm not really sure. What a year. So Friday was my first anniversary of that diagnosis, and the Supreme Court did what the Supreme Court did. And so I'm not physically I've not found the accommodations I need to be able to attend protests yet, because walking is still limited to a few blocks for me. And I didn't feel like taking a chair to a protest was the right look, but I got to get over that so I can participate in more actions going forward. So it also meant I didn't work very hard to secure a guest, because we've just kind of been swimming in it, just pretty drowning in despair, right? But I put out a call on Instagram today, said who is feeling spontaneous and wants to take an hour-long break from just being sad about the state of the world. And my friend Jessica, who we talked to earlier this year about her when she spent almost 2 years traveling the world, she was like, yeah, she was doing meal prep. She was like, let me put my food in the oven and send me a link and I'll hop online. And so we talked about her trip to Jordan and to the southeast of the United States and to Edinburgh and to London for the Jubilee and things that she's learned as she navigates a work from anywhere job in corporate America. So I'm really grateful that she was willing to talk, and to the other people who also raised their hands and said, maybe me, I'm coming for you next. So with that, get your boosters. Your little kids can get, your under fives can get their vaccines now. So I hope they're getting their vaccines. So get that booster, wear your mask, wash your hands, and make time to enjoy your favorite things. Hello and welcome to Finding Favorites. I'm your host, Leah Jones, and this is the podcast where we learn about people's favorite things and get recommendations without using an algorithm. It's a weird week. I didn't really make plans for doing an episode, and then I woke up today and I put on Instagram, who wants to take a break from their Sunday day, be spontaneous, and talk to me? And I am so thrilled that Jess said, yes, I want to come back. Jess, how are you doing today?
I am doing pretty well. It's a beautiful day here. I got the door and the windows open, just letting in some fresh air. And it's been definitely a heavy, hard week. And so I'm just, kind of sitting in the moment and being thankful for all the little things.
Yeah. Yeah. So people will know this from the description if they read it in advance. But Jess is our intrepid world traveler who was here earlier, I think this year, but could it have been last year that we talked already?
So you and I talked in January, and then the episode came out in February.
Yes.
And I will say, this is like Bill O'Reilly. We're doing it live. I legitimately responded to you probably 10 minutes ago.
10 minutes, yeah.
And before, when I was on last time, I had talking points, and I kind of had some stuff organized in my thinking.
Yes.
And I don't. So you can ask me literally anything you want, and it's just going to kind of be off the cuff.
I love it. I love it. Because it was such a good episode, because you were so thoughtful about that trip, your reflections on the trip.
Yeah.
And sharing just start to finish how it went. But I think since we last talked, if Instagram is telling me the truth, you did another couple week adventure?
Yes. So since I talked to you last time, so when I talked to you in January, we talked about my big trip that was for more than a year, but I had also just done 2 weeks in Arizona over the holidays because I was supposed to be in Morocco, and then Omicron hit, and thus was I'm just going to stay domestic because that'll just be easier. And then since then, I went to, and then I took kind of a break-ish. I did a road trip actually down to Charleston, Savannah, and Asheville. So I kind of did a big loop, and I took my car and did a road trip there. And then in May, because I can't believe it's almost July, in May, I was gone for 2 weeks again, and I made up. So I had a tour, and I may have mentioned this on our last episode. In April of 2020, I was supposed to go to Jordan on a tour when I was finishing up my long trip. Yeah. And that obviously got canceled. And I kept kind of having this credit because they would not refund the amount. They were like, no, you have a credit. And, they kept extending it. They were generous in, continuing to extend it. But for me, it kind of felt like there was always this thing that was out there of I got to use this eventually. And, as time continues to pass and move at a rapid clip, I was like, I got to go, I got to really carve out time because I could have gone anywhere within where this tour company operates.
Oh,
but when I looked at what the options were, I didn't have to use it on the tour that I was going to do. For me, I still wanted to do that trip. And because the trip was in Jordan to go see Petra, from the U.S., that's trust me, I now know it is an 11-hour flight from Chicago there, although direct.
Yes.
And so it just kind of kept hanging over and over and over because it was a bigger commitment in time off from my job. And so finally I was just forget it. I'm going to just do it, check the box. I could use my whole credits, so I only ended up paying with tax and stuff for the trip itself, $20 out of pocket. And then there was airfare and others. So I was able to have a low out-of-pocket additional cost for me, which was kind of what I was really aiming for. But all the
Right.
other trips they offered, that were accessible to Americans, I like just didn't really want to do. Some of it was going through Europe. Well, I could do a lot of that stuff on my own.
Right.
Some of it was like, oh, you can go to Australia or New Zealand. Well, I spent extensive time in both places. I would
Yeah.
love to go back, but it's like I didn't need a tour to take me to some of
Right.
these things because I did
But
it
I
myself.
feel like Petra, because like I've gone to Israel a bunch
Yeah.
of times.
Oh, yeah.
And Petra, it's not a day trip quite, but it's like often people will take like a weekend out
Oh,
of
yeah.
a trip to Israel and go to Petra, and it's something that I absolutely want to do. So it's sort of like always on the list as like a possible addition to a trip to Israel. Like once you've seen your friends and you've done all the, because Israel, the country, is the size of New Jersey. So like you can cover a lot of territory in a couple trips or just one trip.
Right.
So Petra hangs out there. So did you fly direct to, is it Amman?
Yeah.
Is that where you fly into for Jordan?
It's correct. So I flew direct from Chicago O'Hare to Amman on Royal Jordanian Airlines.
Ooh.
United now offers that route as well, but at the time it did not. So I flew direct, and it was 11 hours. And I was like, boy, it's just been a long time since I've done one of these.
Right.
And then I landed, but we were late leaving O'Hare, and so I got in late, and so it's like and then it's like a half hour into Amman from the airport, everything went really smoothly overall. But it's just, man, when you're arriving at like 4:00 in the afternoon the next day, like,
Yeah.
it really kind of messes up your day. Although you don't have to stay awake for very long. Like, I just was so exhausted
Right.
that I'm
That
like,
even staying awake the extra 5 or 6 hours to get to like a bedtime to reset is hard.
yeah. Like my tour group, when I met up with them, they were like, do you want to go to dinner with us? And I said, I need to wash my hands, I need to brush
Yeah.
my teeth, and I need to change my shoes, and then I will be ready. Like,
Yes.
you're just going on adrenaline at that point. And I was
Yep.
like, I do not have to be awake for very long, and that's good enough.
Yeah. And you need to be away from the temptation of your hotel bed.
Yeah. I knew the minute I took a shower and laid down, I was not getting up. So
Yeah.
I was like, nope, we're going to keep the train moving, and I'm
Yeah.
just going to go until I burn out.
Great.
So I was there. I wasn't there the whole time. So it was about an 8-day trip, and we went all over. Like, we went
Cool.
to Petra. We went to Wadi Rum in the desert. We did like a sizable loop for that size country because Jordan is not very big either, or have many people spread out because it's mostly desert.
Right.
And so we went right along kind of like the fence border, like the road or the highway that goes along where we could see into Israel on the
Yeah.
other side. I could have upgraded that trip and like gone into Israel because they'll take a group in. But, at that time it just wasn't available. And I'm like, it just felt like this clock was continuously ticking down
Yeah.
and that I need to use this. And so from Jordan, I flew to Edinburgh and spent about 5 days there. And then I took the train down to London and was there for the Queen's Jubilee weekend.
So
and then
cool.
flew out. Because obviously London to Chicago, I mean,
6 hours?
6, 7 hours, but there's so many options.
Yeah.
It's so much easier to get out of London back to the States than,
Amman. Yeah.
Amman. I could have taken a direct flight back, but I kind of was like, I got to continue to use some of this time. We had Memorial Day weekend for your international listeners, which is one of our big holidays here.
Yeah.
So, I had this like extra time. I was kind of like, yeah, I think I'm just going to kind of like tack it on.
Nice.
So yeah.
On the trip to Petra and around Jordan, how many people, was this like a 40-person bus? Was it a 15-passenger van? Like, what was your tour group like?
So this is, as listeners may remember from my previous episode, which I have listened to an embarrassing amount of times. And I'm going to take actually one quick second and tell you this. When I saw it posted, I listened to it and I told a couple of friends that it was available, but I didn't send them the link yet.
Uh-huh.
And I cried. I cried listening to it. In a good way, because I truly just like couldn't believe that was me, like that was
Yeah.
my voice, and it was me talking about something so serious and personal to me in a way in which not many people took like an interest in, or like didn't kind of ask some of those questions.
Yeah.
So, yeah. And then I forced a few of my friends to listen to it, but both of my aunts agreed that it was great and they thought I was very funny. And so hopefully they
Good.
will find me also appropriate in this format again.
Yes.
So this was the first time I had really done like a multi-day tour. You know, when I went to Vietnam, I did like a 2-day tour to go out to Ha Long Bay, which, you know, you need to do to go out there. Mm-hmm. But this was the first time I was like 7, 8 days. And I was like, oh my God, like I was super nervous because you just never know. Like you can get a good group or you can get a not good group. And 7 days can still feel like a very long time.
Right.
So we had a max of 16 people, and which I thought was a good number, but in my opinion, 12 would have been a little bit better. Mm-hmm. Overall, I will say this. I do not consider myself a lucky person, yet lucky things sometimes happen to me. Mm-hmm. And I got very lucky in that we had a good group. I had an incredible guide, and I fully believe that I may be ruined for any future tour because in my first multi-day one, I felt like overall everything went great. You know, I was the third oldest person on that tour.
You were the third oldest.
Yeah.
I thought you were going to say like you were the youngest by 30 years.
No. I didn't really know what to expect. And so I was the third oldest, and you could kind of tell. Like, you could tell one guy came to party, and he's like, oh, I can sleep on 3 hours a night. And I'm like, 3 hours? Oh, my God. Mm-mm. There were times I definitely felt my age, and you could see the widening gap in maturity and life experience.
Right.
But again, like, you know, kind of in those situations where all of us were together, you know, people generally, like, got along. Good. So the tour I did was not just like a highlights of Jordan. It was what they call a multi-sport. So it was like you were very active. You were hiking, you were exploring, you know, you were going and doing things that would not be kind of on a more traditional, just like highlights sightseeing tour. They take you to places and drop you off. I will say this. I had a great experience. I got very lucky in certain things. There's only one thing I would do differently, and I would do another multi-day tour. But I would go to Jordan at a different time of year. I was there at the end of May, and that was the last of those tours they were running for the summer.
Because that's when, is it the Hamuda? The hot winds come in?
I have no idea. I just know, I hope I can swear on this again because it was hot as fuck. It was so fucking hot. I got heat stroke, and because you're being active.
Right.
And there were some times where it was a struggle. Like we were going through a canyon, which was incredible. And like you were walking through water, so your feet were cold and in cold water. But it was like 42 degrees Celsius, which is like 110 something Fahrenheit. And you are just baking. And I was like, I think... I don't know. And I got kind of sick in the desert just because, you know, it's just like the heat just kind of broke me down like slowly. So I had a wonderful time. I would absolutely recommend it to people. It was the right pace and it was the right amount of time for me too. And I had very realistic expectations going in. But
maybe like a March.
Yeah, that's what I said literally
like
at the
February,
end.
March, yeah.
Yeah, I should have gone. I was planning originally in April and then time got away from me. And I was like, I absolutely should have gone like March, April. Yeah. If I were to go back to that region, I would only go during those times because the heat was just, it was too much. And I knew it was going to be intense. I guess I was not fully prepared for like what it is that I walked into.
Yeah.
But
how's your timer?
We got less than 5 minutes.
Okay, all right.
So for me, it was still a great experience. You know, I got along with my roommate. And I will tell you actually a funny story about my roommate. I teased this a little bit on Instagram stories. So the oldest person on our trip, she did not disclose her age, but I know she had adult children. So, you know, if you do a little math in your head, I think she was probably in her mid-60s.
Okay.
German, but lives in Colorado, has lived in the U.S. for like 20 years.
Okay.
I joked, I was like, she was the perfect roommate for me in that she loved air conditioning. And if you know many people from Europe, they do not. And it was so hot that I just needed to like blast air conditioning to cool my body temperature down.
Yeah.
And she was like, oh, let's set it as low as it'll go. And I was like, I love you. I was like, she loves air conditioning and that's good enough. I will tell you one quirk about her though. She sleeps in the nude.
With a roommate?
Yeah.
That she's not romantically involved in?
Or have met prior to this, yes. And so it was really funny because the first night I see her just like wrapped in a towel. She was tasteful. Like it could have been much more flagrant. She was wrapped in a towel and she gets into bed. And I texted a friend of mine in Chicago. I was like, hey, my roommate wore a towel to bed. Isn't that super weird? And then it was like all of a sudden, the little Tetris pieces like fall into place.
Yeah.
And I was like, oh my God. So, I don't say anything because she loves air conditioning. I don't want to rock the boat. Like, I got to think about my primary needs here.
Right. And you're sleeping in 2 separate beds.
Sleeping in 2 separate beds, twin beds.
Okay.
But, like, I'm still there.
Yeah.
So, I don't say anything. We continue to move on. I clearly know. And she doesn't say anything. So we get to Petra, and after Petra, we're staying at the Dead Sea. And so we go into this hotel, and they push the 2 twin beds together. And I couldn't get them separated. And I was like, oh my God, I'm sleeping next to this woman who is very nice, but like clearly is sleeping naked, and we are basically in the same bed.
Yeah.
And so she slept under the covers and I slept over the covers. Not that I thought anything was going to happen. That was just because it's like this thing that like we're not talking about.
Yeah.
So we are at Petra, and it is, again, like 115 degrees Fahrenheit outside. Brutally, punishingly hot. We've been there since like 6 a.m. when they let you in so we could see the treasury before all the crowds show up, and you can see it in the gorgeous pink morning light. I mean, really incredible. And I am so hot, and I am starting to hallucinate because I am getting heat stroke. And I drank like 3 liters of water. And it just, like, after a while, it's just like not doing anything. You're just sweating it out so fast.
Right.
So I start having hallucinations, and I had this moment of, I'm like, I need to get out of the sun. Like, no one is listening to me when I say this. Like, sweat is running down me. My clothes are drenched. And everybody else on the tour is this way, too. It was not just me.
Right.
Other people got physically sick from the heat and other things. And I just was like, I need to get out of the sun. I need to lay in air conditioning. And my roommate was like, is everything okay? Like, she was a nurse as well. And I was like, I don't feel well. I need to get out of the sun. And like, no one was kind of listening to what I was saying. I was like, and I got very aggressive, and I was like, I need to get out of the fucking sun. Like, stop talking to me and putting me out in the sun. Like, I'm going to lose my mind.
Right.
And I felt I was going to pass out. Like something was clearly on the verge of happening. And so I say to her, I was like, I need you to be out of the room for a little bit because I need to shower, and I want to like lay naked in air conditioning because my body is so hot. I need to cool it down fast.
Yeah.
And it was like kind of as a joke. I was like half joking. And she turns around to me and she's like, Jessica, I need to tell you something. And I was like, okay. Because at this point, I'm like, I don't even know what it could be. And she's like, Jessica, I don't know if you know this, but I sleep in the nude. And I looked at her and I was like, insert her name. I will not say her name here. I know. I said, I've known since the first night. I was like, I am your roommate.
Yeah.
And she was like, I just don't like, she like felt she had to justify it to me, which like, I don't care. I was like, no, I've known this. Like, it's so weird that you're like saying it now.
But like you are asking her, like you want naked shower time on top of the sheets.
Yeah.
You want like the cold air blowing on your body, which is not necessarily a modest proposal. No. So you're like, hey, just give me half an hour.
Yeah.
An hour of like, let me just be on top of the sheets under the air conditioning, which is just a completely different ask.
It is. And so she felt that this was maybe a way we were going to bond, where she's like, oh my God, like, not that we were going to be in the same room and doing it, but like, oh my gosh, like you don't have a problem with this. And I was like, X name, I know you sleep in the nude. I've known it since the first night. And we were kind of laughing about it. And it was like, oh, okay, I just don't like things. She was like, I just don't like things touching me when I sleep. I'm like, well, you're sleeping on sheets and you're sleeping on a mattress. But like, I don't want to apply logic. We are not applying logic here.
Right.
And so I just kind of said, I was like, I kind of like can't believe you thought I didn't know.
Right.
And we're just like staring at each other. We kind of like laughed about it. But anyhow, I texted my friend who I told initially about this in Chicago and she could not stop laughing because she's like, how did she think you didn't know?
Right.
And I'm like, I don't know, but it's out in the open. Like, it is out in the open, and she gave me my time. So yeah, I have to pause for a second because the timer is going off. I will be right back.
Get your casserole.
So yeah, she thought I had no idea, and she felt the need to like tell me in this moment in public in Petra when I'm like
While you're hallucinating,
while
while
I'm
you're like,
hallucinating from heat stroke.
oh
And
my gosh.
it honestly, I could not have scripted something funnier, to be totally
Right.
honest. I could not have scripted something funnier in that minute. And so she lives in Colorado. I'm going out to Colorado for part of the summer. And so we're going to hang out
Oh, I love it.
or maybe go
Yay.
hiking together. So, yeah, my roommate.
So did you get like, I guess the benefit of having a nurse for a roommate is, so when you get back to the hotel, did they get your electrolytes balanced? It sounds like maybe you needed like salt or something. Like I don't know about heat stroke, but
I just needed to cool down. Like I just laid, I
Yeah.
just like took an ice cold shower and just laid down. Like
Yeah.
my body just needed to dial it down a little bit. And so I got lucky with the roommate who was, although she slept in the nude, she loved air conditioning. And again,
Yes.
I got to pick I got to pick my battles.
Mm-hmm.
And so I had a good experience with that. And so like then so I roomed with her like the entire time. And you know,
Nice.
sometimes it works out, sometimes it doesn't. I was definitely ready to kind of be on my own after that because you're just with people like all the time.
Right.
And you know, we were driving for sometimes like 3 hours, you know, around. And look, it's super scenic and it was really great. But boy, that just really drains you out. Like you're out in the sun,
Yeah.
you're out in the heat hiking, and then you are driving for like 3 hours to your next location.
Yeah. What was the vehicle?
It
Was it a
like
big
one of
coach van
those-
or
It
coach?
wasn't one of those big coach vans, you know, the one where like you put all the luggage like underneath
Yeah.
and you're sitting really high. It was kind of like a medium-sized vehicle.
Okay.
I don't know how to like it wasn't like a passenger van, but it was kind of like a mini bus, I guess is like
Yeah.
the better way to describe it.
So kind of a every seat was full sort of situation
Oh,
where
yeah.
you couldn't. Okay.
Oh yeah. And like I claimed the seat in the front because
Yep.
there's no way in the back I was not going to puke at some
Vomit.
point.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's the thing about self-awareness. It's like I just kind of know
Yeah.
like what I'm gunning for. So it was great driving around. I mean, it's such a great way to see things, and so that worked out really well. I had a overall good roommate, overall good group, amazing tour guide. There was only one thing we did because most of it was hiking, which is what I was there to do.
Yeah.
But there was one activity we did that I sent feedback to the tour agency after. So they have you fill out this like really extensive questionnaire
Yeah.
and about how the experience was because they genuinely want the feedback. And so I'm like, oh, I'm ready. If I've been told by men, women, and on performance reviews that I can be very critical. So like, I'll tell you what I think. And really, I only had, one kind of piece of feedback, which was one of the activities we did was canyoning. And I have never done that before.
Right.
And I'm like, well, they go, oh, we're going to be like go hiking through this canyon. I was like, oh, like, okay. No. I told my piece of feedback to the tour is I'm like, you needed to make that significantly clearer because a lot of people felt really surprised by like what that activity is. What you're doing
What is, because because I've seen your pictures of when you went to Zion and you went
Yeah.
to the Southwest. So like, was it cantaloupe? It wasn't cantaloupe.
No,
Antelope
it was
Canyon?
Antelope Canyon. So I did some of the stuff in Arizona, like from
Right.
the north, kind of like on the border with Utah. Like I went into Utah to do like Monument Valley. You like go from Arizona into
Yeah.
Utah and then you go back. It's kind of weird, but
So that is not. Was this the one? Okay.
okay. So I don't even
Just
have.
tell me about what was the actual
Activity.
hike
Okay.
that was not properly described by the word canyoning.
So it basically involved being submerged in water for
Nope.
multiple hours. And oh no.
How much
Oh,
of your
no, no.
body?
Oh, like up to your neck.
No.
Because I'm petite, I was like up to my neck, or
No.
you have a life vest on. So like in the end, the water never came up to like more than like my mid chest. But if I wouldn't have had that on, I would have been fully up to my neck, if not more. So he's telling us this, and like you can see the look of kind of shock on a lot of people's face because he was like, oh no, you're like full in on water, and I'm like, what? And he's like, and then you're swimming for part of it, and then you're floating for part of it. Oh no, oh Leah, we're not done yet.
No.
You are scaling up rocks where water is flowing and hitting you in the face. And you are like using rope, and you are using metal kind of like ladder, like handles that you put your feet on. And the look of horror on everyone's face. So naturally I go start, Googling images. And I told the same friend who knew about my roommate sleeping nude.
Uh-huh.
I said to her, I was like, I don't know if I can do this. Like, I don't know. And
so
I'm
is
sending
this
her
like the
photos.
night before, like you're at group dinner and he's like, all right, let me tell you what's going to happen tomorrow. So we're going to go canyoning.
Yeah.
Wear your bathing suit because you're going to get wet.
Oh, I mean, he said you could wear a bathing suit, but he's like, women should just like probably wear regular clothes. So like what I ended up wearing was like I wore a sports bra. I wore like exercise pants, like, like leggings.
Yeah.
And then I wore a t-shirt because when you go in, I thought, oh, okay, we're going to kind of slowly work our way in. Oh no, you climb down a ladder to get near the canyon and you're already up to your chest. And I was like, oh my God. I was like, stay strong. Like, look, you don't get a medal for finishing this. Like, just do your best. Do your physical
But also
best.
like, there's no off ramp in the middle, is there? Like, you have to do it, right? If you start it, you have to finish.
Yeah, so that's what no one really kind of asked, like what I thought the only option was to finish. No.
Right.
It turns out the option is you can stop partway through and then just wait for your group to come back. And so
that it was a hike out there and back through the same
and then back, and then you turned around and came back.
Okay.
So it took us an hour and a half in, which was actually less than I kind of thought it was going to be, because you are then at one point, like when you're fully, like would have been up to my neck, if not over my head in water, they have rope. So I'm like in this life vest, hanging on rope, crawling across. And guess what? You know those little fishes that you see at like kind of festivals, like where they give you the pedicure, like the little, oh yeah, they're in there. And those guys, oh no, those guys are nibbling at every available piece of skin. And so they're nibbling at because I had Keen, here's another, not an ad, just a fan. I wear Keen, like hiking sandals. I take always a pair with me when I travel because it's usually good if like we're going on longer walks, if I've been in my hiking boots too long, whatever.
Right.
Those
but
shoes,
also they're cute enough to wear with a skirt. Like you can wear them for a night out.
Yes.
They're fine.
I know someone who will remain nameless who absolutely hates those shoes and thinks they are ugly and would never wear them. And look, I don't disagree, but they're also functional. So like when I'm looking at what I can pack and travel with, they're good enough. So I had those shoes on, and those shoes saved my life because they had a thick enough and heavy enough sole where when I was hanging on to rock and when I was putting my foot on the metal steps, they had enough traction where I wasn't slipping.
Right.
So then the fish are eating at my feet between the webbing and the sandals, and it tickles because I'm very ticklish on the bottom of my feet.
Yeah.
But I do remember having a moment of I'm like, I don't know if I can do this. And my friend in Chicago who just saw photos, she's like, well, if boomers can do it, you can do it. And I was like, I don't think those boomers finished. Like, I don't know if they finished. And so,
oh my gosh,
there was one point.
How tight does it get?
Not tight. I mean, you're never going through where you're like, you have to kind of smush yourself through because I probably would have lost it.
Yeah.
But it was a very wide opening. It was always very wide.
Okay.
But the problem was there was one moment where this is where being 5'3", like, and some of the other petite people on the trip were like, it was really hard because our legs aren't long enough to kind of help get you over to like the next piece. And there was one moment where I'm like hanging onto a rope. I'm trying to grab onto this ladder thing. And at that point, it's just adrenaline. Like my body does not accept that we are like not finishing this. And so it is just pure adrenaline, like pulling me through.
Yeah.
And I was standing there and water is hitting me so hard in the face. I had to climb up this ladder with my eyes closed because I couldn't see anything.
No, this is my nightmare.
And we get to the end, and one of the women on the trip was like, oh, that's the ending right up there. Like, there's this beautiful, like, waterfall. And I honestly could have started to cry. Like, women were hugging each other and holding each other and screaming. And it was, like, a really nice moment.
Yeah.
But it was... I was so drained that I fell asleep in the bus afterward. And like for the next 3 days, every single muscle in my body hurt because it was straight adrenaline that was pushing me through that course. And so my feedback to the tour group was, you have to make this significantly clear. Like, I should have brought clothes specifically to do this. I had the right shoes, but many people didn't.
Right.
And I just said, like, that should have been significantly clearer. Not that it maybe would have changed me doing the trip, but it would have made me feel more prepared for that because I felt totally caught off guard.
Yeah.
So, and there are no photos because you were submerged in so much water that, like, they warned us. They're like, do not take cameras, do not take any of this. One guy did in one of those water safe carriers, and so there's like 1 or 2 photos out there, but that's it. It was truly something like, there is no out.
Wow.
But I did, I get out of that and I'm exhausted and I'm just like emotionally drained, but at the same time I'm like, boy, it is amazing what your body can do when you push it really to kind of like the brink.
Yeah.
You just dig something deeper and deeper inside of you that propels you forward.
Right.
But I don't know, I would never do it again. I walked out there, I'm like, I will never do this again. I will never do this again. So I'm glad I had the experience and I'm glad I made it and I'm glad I made it back because going back was easier. You're not climbing up, you're going with the water down and out.
Yeah.
So we made it out in like 45 minutes because you're going with the flow of water, you're not fighting it.
So there's more on the way out that maybe you can like lift your feet up and get pushed? Or
yeah, so like at one point when like, so the rock that I was getting like hit in the face with water and where I was climbing up with my eyes closed, you're going up this little cliff and we just slid down like it's a water slide.
All right.
And that was, I don't know. I texted my friend, I was like, I made it out alive, and she's like, that's great. I'm like, I'm never doing this again. Like, I will never do this again, ever, 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 ever. It does not care if it will. It doesn't matter. I'm not even going to think of a scenario because it wouldn't matter.
Right. No, I think it's something that had you been properly prepared before you got on the plane, you would have had a totally different feeling about it.
I think I would have.
You may at the end still have said, I will never do that again.
Right.
But you might have felt better about, like, if you'd gone in knowing that you were going to get one of those pedicures over your whole body.
I just was like, I kept giggling because I'm like, it's nibbling at my feet between the sandal. I'm like, and it just is such a bizarre feling. But I will say like that, I walked out of there, I'm like, I'm never doing this again, which reminded me exactly of a hike I did in New Zealand. That was intense, but in a different reason. It was 9 hours as opposed to like almost 3. And I just was like, I would never do this again, but I am so glad I did it and that it's over.
Right.
So, and that was like the only other example I could think of where like you push your body truly like kind of to the limit and you just sort of see what it does. And instinctually something comes out in you where it's like, nope, we're doing this. I'm going to get out of this. Like, I do not accept that I will not finish this.
Yeah. Wow.
Yeah. So that I would say that was the only thing I didn't really love on the trip because I just was caught so off guard. Mm-hmm. But, Petra was also very hot and very exhausting. Like we climbed 900 steps up to go see like kind of this very top view. But, it was amazing. You see it in the morning when it's just bright pink and the sun is barely over the rocks, and it was really special. And so I'm really glad that I got to go do that. I do wish I had kind of done it 2 years ago, and I was also 2 years younger. However, I still think that, my 60-some-year-old roommate finished it, no problem. Yeah. So anything's possible.
That's amazing. So then you hop on a plane, you go up to Edinburgh.
Yeah. Transfer through London, head up to Edinburgh.
Had you done Edinburgh on any of your previous trips before?
No, so I'm kind of in this thing right now, and I think we talked about this a little bit last time, where I'm like all about new things. So when I travel, it's like I'm trying not to repeat stuff right now. I want to see stuff that's new. So even though I ended in London, it was for like a very specific event.
Yeah, going to the Jubilee is not any other trip you've ever taken to London.
Exactly. So like that was a little bit that I viewed as like kind of an exception. I was there for like a moment in time. So I've never been to Scotland, and I was kind of thinking of, okay, where could I do maybe like a weekend trip, kind of like a couple days. And so I ended up changing a lot of that last leg that was supposed to be all in London to just be mostly in Edinburgh and then come down just for 2 nights.
Yeah.
And it was great. First of all, I went from 110-degree weather to 55, and I was
glorious.
I was walking around and I'm like, I'm healing. My body is healing. My body knows what to do with this weather. It is accustomed to this. It is so welcome. I'm like, it is cold and I'm going to put a jacket on. I'm like, this is fantastic.
You're like, I'm going to have some shepherd's pie. I'm going to have some Guinness. Like, give me all your warm, cozy foods.
I was like, nature. I just felt, I'm like, my body is healing. Like, my body is healing and it is home. And so, no, I'd never been to Scotland. I did a day trip out to the Highlands. And I think in hindsight, I knew I was not obviously going to be able to do everything.
Yeah.
And I spent the bulk of the time in Edinburgh with just that day trip out. And I just had a fantastic time. The weather was overall great. And I even loved it when it was raining. I'm like, oh my God, it's so cute.
Beautiful. Yeah.
It was so green. Because of the time of year. So even in the rain, it was just this like bright electric green. And when we went out to the Highlands, we had mostly sun as well. And it just like the landscape was completely awe-inspiring. And I immediately said, I was like, I'm coming back and I'm going to rent a car and just go around.
Yeah.
So it was a really nice like first introduction. Edinburgh was so charming. I absolutely loved it. Yeah. And I was hoping to go down to Glasgow for a day trip, and I just like didn't end up doing it because I chose the Highlands instead. And I stayed in Old Town, and because it's obviously summer there as it is here, the sun would rise at 4:30 in the morning, and it would set at like 9:45.
Wow. Right, because it is very far north.
It is very far north. Yeah. And so I remember I was like...
Is it like equal... It's probably even with like Maine, right?
Maybe.
I
mean, they are far enough north, like Iceland is, where you have midnight sun, like where the sun never fully sets.
Yeah.
But like we had just a crazy amount of sunlight. And so honestly, I loved it because it helps you, like it completely restructures how you do your day. You wake up, it's sunny, great. You go do these day trips, and we were gone like for like 10, 12 hours because we went as far out as you could without having to stay overnight, but it's sun the whole time. It's light the whole time. You're not coming back in darkness. And then, because we got back by like 8:00. And then, in the middle of the day, you can just kind of go have a little lay down. You can go kind of chill out for like 2-3 hours. And like, you're not missing anything. You're still out doing stuff at like 7-8 o'clock at night.
Right.
So that was very weird. But I mean, honestly, it was just such a nice way to kind of like decompress a little bit, have something a little bit lower maintenance, and then to just cool down after Jordan.
Yeah.
I just was so hot, and my body was just needed the break from the heat.
Yeah. It's good to hear that you did continue to like do tours and see things, because I after that trip you took to Jordan, I would have gone to Edinburgh and just slept for the 5 days. Like, I don't know that I would have left my hotel room.
I definitely probably should have dialed it down a little bit more, but it's new and it's exciting. I was just like, I just want to go out. So in London, I actually did less than I thought. So I think in hindsight, I might have done like 1 or 2 of those things differently, but I was also just so exhausted by that point that I kind of dialed London down way more than I thought. So the only activity of the Queen's that I ended up doing, because I didn't get tickets for some of the other stuff, was I went down to watch the parade. And I was getting ready to fly back to the U.S. At that time, you still had to test to come into the U.S. get a negative test for COVID. So I go and I get this test done, and I test negative, which is great. And then I go stand in a crowd of thousands of people who aren't wearing a mask. And I was like, this is great. Like, what? This is the absolute thing I should have done. Like,
yes.
So, went down and like watched the parade. I still had a great time. I think I just was so tired, kind of near the end that I, I could have probably been more active. I just was so exhausted.
What was the Jubilee vibe?
It was significantly more crowded than I thought it was going to be, which I
Yeah.
guess I didn't know what to expect. But there was, people seemed very like celebratory. There was just tons of people out all the time, like in the streets.
Yeah.
And then you would have these activities. And so they had viewing areas in the parks where you could just go watch on a screen, or you could like go down to like where the actual events were in front of Buckingham Palace. And so I did not end up doing like the concert. I tried to just do new things in London I didn't get to do on other like previous trips. And then I went and watched the parade, and the parade was pretty great. Like people were really happy and celebratory, and people were really just kind of like there to enjoy it. And I got overall a pretty good spot where I could see stuff. And, it's just hard when you're 5'3". It's like,
Yeah.
I mean, it just, I either had to commit the time to get there super early, and I didn't want to do that. The other thing that happened in Edinburgh, which I alluded to on Instagram as well, is I sprained my ankle in Edinburgh. And it was my own fault, and I did it in the dumbest way possible. But I sprained it, and I went, and I had to limp because obviously in Europe, they believe in a better quality of life and work hours. I had to go find the one Boots that was still open at like 6 o'clock at night to go get a brace, like a compression, like wraparound brace.
Yeah.
And it was excruciatingly painful. And I had to basically kind of like walk on it with the brace on, like locked into my hiking boots. So like the ankle is totally like put in, and for days. I mean, and so it's like I'm standing for hours watching this parade in a sprained ankle, which, was better, but wasn't great. And I come back and I have to go see the doctor, and they're like, oh, we think you actually fractured your foot. And I'm like, probably. I was like, I wouldn't be surprised if I did.
Yeah.
But I'm like, I had no idea.
Right.
So it turns out it was only a sprain, but that definitely kind of dampened a little bit near the end because I just couldn't be as mobile as I normally needed to. And in these cities, you need to be, you're out all the time walking.
Yep.
So yes, despite standing in excruciating pain at the parade, it was 100% worth it.
Good. So was the parade, the Queen was not in the parade, right? She watched from Buckingham Palace and or like who was in the parade?
Well, so the parade was, I think if she had been in better health, it would have been a bit different. So what they had were things that kind of, like, I don't want to say floats, but they had like buses that sort of, each section of the parade was like a decade of her reign. So it started in the 1950s, and they had, like British celebs from the 1950s, and then it had kind of like all these dancers and other things. And then it would be a bus that was the 60s. It was kind of like a little time capsule of that.
Oh, neat.
So the horse-drawn carriage that she normally would have been in and was in when she was crowned, they had a video screen of like her in it, like as she looked when she was going for her coronation.
Yeah.
So in theory, I think she would have probably been in that if she had been in better health. And so she was only there so the weekend was Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday. She made an appearance on Thursday, and then there was talk that she didn't do anything else the rest of the weekend, but there was talk that at the end of Sunday after the parade that she would make another appearance. So, but that nobody kind of could confirm that. No one knew for sure. And so we were watching the parade, and it was great. Had a great time. I personally love the Great British Baking Show. The Great British Baking, I'll take a quick pause. The Great British Baking Show held together my fragile mental health during the worst parts of the pandemic when I got back from my big trip.
Yeah.
It just like, it was like a little hug all around me.
I think that show did a lot for a lot of people's, because one, they're just making wonderful food.
Yeah.
But two, they are so kind to each other.
They are.
The bakers are so kind to each other that it's just a joy to watch, because it's not the American, I'm not here to make friends. Like they are there to fall in love with each other and be friends for life.
Yeah.
And it comes through with every bake they do.
They're very supportive, like very helpful to each other. And really what they get at the end is this little pie serving dish that says the Great British Baking Show.
Right.
I had never watched the show before. And so getting into like the first winter I was back, when, it was just very dark, unvaccinated time. I started watching it, and I started with the most recent season, and I went back.
Yeah.
And it was it 100%. Like, I look at that show and I'm like, I kept it together because of that. It just was my escape, and it was like my way of like kind of coping through that dark time. And so Prue, who was one of the judges in the later seasons, who replaced Mary Berry, was in the parade, and I started screaming, not waving, screaming, because to me that was like seeing the Queen. I was like, I just wanted her to look at me, and I wanted to tell her, thank you for helping keep me together.
Yeah.
And so anyhow, I saw Prue, and I just went
I
wild.
love it.
It was great. So the parade ends, and everybody starts filing down the Mall, which is the large road that leads up to Buckingham Palace, and like the roundabout in a way that's in front of there with Queen Victoria. So people start filing down this, and I'm like, I can't walk down that in a sprained ankle. I cannot stand up anymore. So I found in St. James Park, I found a television screen, and they broadcast Ed Sheeran playing, which was really nice. And then she came out, and then everybody stood up and sang the British like national anthem,
The God Save the Queen.
God Save the Queen, which I always think is weird she's present for, because she doesn't sing, obviously. And to me, that is just kind of like weird always to see, because it's like they're singing to her, but she's clearly not, because she is like, yes, save me. But
I mean, I guess it's like you don't sing happy birthday when it's your birthday.
I guess so. I don't know why it looks always so, I find it so endlessly amusing.
Yeah.
And so that, was a really like special moment. I had kind of met this woman from South Africa who just moved to the UK. She happened to be standing next to me in the parade. She and I were chatting about things kind of over the course of the parade. And then we went and watched this together. And then, it was really nice. Like, and I got some nice photos, and it was totally worth it. But I was like, I cannot stand on this ankle anymore. Like, I legitimately cannot stand up.
Yeah.
I'm like in excruciating pain. So I could have probably gone down the Mall and tried to see it. I was sort of like, no, I'm okay on the screen, because it's more about the feeling of community. So that was really nice. I am so glad I went up to Edinburgh for as long as I did. I just had such a wonderful time. I don't even know how to describe it.
The day that you went to the Highlands, that's like the sheep, right? I don't know. I just feel like that's where wool is from.
There are sheep there. That is correct. So the big thing that people kept kind of talking about, they have tours that are specific to Outlander, the television show on Star. It's on Stars in the U.S.
Yes.
So people would say, they're like, oh, have you heard of the Battle of Culloden? I was like, yeah, I watch Outlander. And they kind of just... And I was like, but tell me again what it was. Like, that was like season 1. I have not watched that in a long time. So, and this guy just sighed at me, and I was like, I'm sorry.
Right. I'm sorry that we know about your history because of a very popular romantic TV show.
Right. I was like, I have no expectation that all of you look like Jamie, but I have a general understanding like of the history. So you go kind of out into the Highlands, and they film that show in like various parts of the Highlands is actually like a very large area in like Scotland, kind of outside of Edinburgh. So it's like you go into the Highlands like a little bit outside of Edinburgh, and then you can go like way out, like up by Inverness, up by like the Isle of Skye. Like that's way, way, way far north. Yeah. So it is kind of a very broad area. And so I went out kind of as far as you could go on a day trip, and because I wanted to just get as far out of the city like as possible. I wasn't personally interested in whiskey tasting because I do not really drink alcohol anymore. Yeah. I did have a sip of it when I was there, and I just was like, it's just not my thing. But when in Rome, you got to try it. Sure. And so in Jordan, I ate baklava, even though I don't really care for that either, but it's so plentiful and available. And so we went out into the Highlands. We did see some of the sheep, and we saw some of the very long hair red, I'm guessing like cows. I have to post a photo of it because we were fortunate to see one that was like super like mugging for the camera. Yeah. But it was a landscape. It was so green, and it was so like really intense, like high hills and then just flat land. And it was just very dramatic. And so you get into these really small cities where they either survive on tourism because tourists come through there, or
Right.
they are just accustomed to people coming out and experiencing this area. And it was so great. It was so great. It's just so beautiful up there. I can't wait to get back and get out there in a car.
Yeah, that will be a fantastic road trip.
It would be. That would be one I 100% be like, oh, like, just grab a map and get going.
Yeah.
As I mentioned before, I do not drive stick shift, though, so I would have to definitely find a car that would have automatic.
Because it's stick shift and on the other side of the car.
That's correct. It would
Isn't
be stick
it?
shift. Yeah. So the
Yeah.
the steering wheel's on the other side of the car, on the other side of the road, and you're driving stick on top of that. So
I don't know if I could drive a stick shift with my left hand. I
think
also
it's
haven't
kind
driven
of-
stick in 20 years.
Like,
Like,
apparently
I used
it's like
to know how
riding
to
a
do
bike.
it, but
Apparently it's like riding a bike. I mean, my dad drove a stick shift car for a lot of his like teenage into early
Yeah.
20s, and it'll come back. According to him, it does come back. It's just like
Right.
kind of like riding a bike after a long time. Is you got to kind of
Yeah.
like flex the muscle. So anyhow, I would 100% do it and do that kind of road trip around. It was great. Like, it's so beautiful out there. I absolutely loved it. It was super charming, even in cloud and rain. Beautiful in the sun. Like the green, the electric green was just amazing.
wow. Let's talk a little bit as we start to wrap up about your U.S. road trip down to
Yeah.
Charleston. And so was that one a road trip where you was that a remote working situation or was awesome?
Yep. So
Oh, that's great.
I never, like, we did not grow up doing road trips, like driving road trips around the U.S. And so I started doing kind of those sort of trips. Like I drove a lot around Iceland. I drove a lot around parts of Australia because it's so big. And I drove all around New Zealand. And so I kind of had already been like used to doing some of those things within reason. And so I said, okay, well, I could sit cold and alone and, sad in winter in Wisconsin, or I can maybe go test this work from anywhere thing out a little bit. Mm-hmm. And so I decided to do a road trip, and I started just picking cities that like I always had kind of wanted to visit and didn't, but were also kind of geographically within reason, like close to each other. So it was able to be attainable because I also had to be able to leave either on a Friday evening or Saturday morning and like get somewhere by end of day Sunday.
Right.
So I picked Charleston, I picked Savannah, and then I picked Asheville, and because I wanted to see those places, but also we were getting into the point where that humidity and that southern heat was going to come in, and so now was kind of like the time to go.
Yeah.
So I also had not, generally I don't travel and stay in Airbnbs because I'm a solo traveler, so it's generally not too cost effective. However, I was like, so before I would commit to doing some of these things, maybe for like a month, I should kind of get my bearings and do a couple practices. Stay in a place for like a week or two, see how that goes. Okay, what do I learn? What do I need to apply? And think through that way. So I drove down to Charleston. I drove Friday after work from Milwaukee to Chicago. I stayed with a friend outside of Chicago. And then I went Chicago down to Knoxville where I had another friend and I could stay with her. And the first thing I learned on my road trip driving is I'm max 7 hours in a car a day alone.
Yep.
I did 8.5. And I knew the trip from Chicago down to Knoxville was going to be a haul, but I showed up at my friend's house like barely coherent.
Yeah.
I was so like the what is it, the highway hypnosis thing they teach you in driver's ed? I think 100% true.
Yep.
And so I stayed with her for an overnight, and then I did 5 hours from Knoxville down to Charleston.
Okay.
And then Charleston to Savannah is like 2 at most. It's super
Great.
easy. And then Savannah to Asheville on one of the major roads is like 5 hours. So also very attainable. And then on my way back, I stayed with my friend in Knoxville again. And then I went Knoxville to Indianapolis. I stayed overnight in Indianapolis, and then I did Indianapolis back to Milwaukee. So like in theory, what I learned is I should have gone down to
further.
Indy. I should have gone down to Indy, stayed there, and that would have made that more digestible. But anyhow, that's why you do these things. I do these things always in which to learn because I do not pretend, and I'd never done something like this before.
Right.
So I would work during the week, I worked on Eastern time, and I would, work and be available and, plug the time during the day. And then on evenings and weekends, I would go out. So in
Great.
Charleston, I would go out for dinner, and I stayed in part of Charleston where I could get into the downtown area pretty easily.
Yeah.
And it just like worked out perfectly. I could go to the beach on the island I was on, or I could go to downtown. I had dinner reservations in the evenings. And then on the weekends, I just like parked the car in a garage and I just like walked everywhere. And
I love it.
It just was so wonderful. And I had also really great weather when I was there overall. So it would like rain some days during the week when I didn't have stuff to do. But even Charleston in the rain is super charming because the colors of the houses are just so bright. Like I would walk around with an umbrella and I'm like, oh, it's so cute. I love it. So Charleston, I had a wonderful, truly wonderful time. Great food. Then I went down to Savannah, and I was only in Savannah a week because lodging down there is quite expensive. So I had great food down there and a good week. Overall, I think really that was the right amount of time because it's not as big as, let's say, like Charleston and these surrounding areas for things to do. And then I drove up to Asheville and drove through the Blue Ridge Mountains. And
beautiful.
My little car, my 2012 Honda Civic, did great. She wrapped around those turns like no one's business. I only took one switchback a little too fast. And fortunately, there was no one there when I, careened kind of into the other lane. But my car did great, handled those turns like a pro. The only disappointment I would say is that, I went when it was not super hot yet, but it was also not super green. I thought it was going to be a little bit greener. And so you're looking out and it's like so many great views. And I'm like, ooh, it's a lot of shades of brown, a lot of shades of brown. But still, like, I went hiking there to go see some waterfalls and had a great time. Never enough time. But that was a really worthwhile stop and kind of like a nice way to kind of get introduced to other parts of the country.
Yeah.
And then my plan for this summer is I'm going to drive out to Colorado.
Great.
And so the plan for that is I drive from Milwaukee to Lincoln, Nebraska, which is about halfway.
Yeah.
Stay overnight there and then drive the rest of the way to Denver the next day. Obviously with the planes, not a whole lot out there in certain areas. And so Lincoln, although it is like the midway stop, not a whole lot after that. So I was kind of like, okay, I guess I'll leave. My plan right now is to leave on a Saturday morning, drive to Lincoln, Nebraska, stay overnight there, and then finish the way out. And then I go the same way back.
Yeah. Yeah. My nephews over the last couple summers have driven here from Idaho.
Oh, wow.
And they do it in like 3 days. And they said there were parts of Nebraska that just had no cell service. But they were going across because my first nephew drove from Moscow last summer. So I think he came across maybe on 80 or 90. And then the drive this summer left out of Boise. So they were a little bit further south on the trip.
Okay.
But I think they were very happy when they got to. No, the people my nephew who drove this summer came across on 80 because they went to the Iowa 80 truck stop.
Oh, okay.
Which is a highlight.
I guess it is. I will have to look this up. I thought I was kind of looking at like, what do I think the deal is? So each day is going to be about 7 hours, which is kind of like pushing me to my max.
Yeah.
But I think what I'm going to do is just my plan right now is to like leave early enough where I could take like an hour or something break, stop, get out, move around, and then go do another block of time. But so I'm going to be out there for a little while and, rented a place. And the thing that's going to be really nice for this is I'm going to be in one place. So that was a little bit challenging with the last time. I actually overall packed really well with like the essentials I thought I needed or things that I use consistently that I would use there.
Right.
But now it'll be nice to just like have one unload, like I go into the place I'm staying in and then I pack up at the end in which to come back. So I think that'll be really nice not to have to worry.
That'll be so nice.
Yeah, it'll just be a different kind of experience. I'll still do stuff around Colorado like on weekends or something. So maybe like an overnight here or there, but like I still have a solid base for a block of time.
Yeah.
So I'm excited. It'll be different.
Great.
I've been to Colorado once before, but again, this is a little different because I'm going to be going outside of different areas. I'm going to be kind of more intentional with some of that time there. Mm-hmm. Also, I just couldn't drive out to Portland, Oregon. Portland, Oregon was kind of the other option, but that's like a 3-day trip, and
It's 3 days, yeah.
It's 3 days.
I mean, so I've driven to and from New York a couple times in the last 5 years, and because the first time I did the drive was with my dad, so I had a second driver, and the second time my dad flew and I drove, and I just will stop at if I need to stop at every rest stop and close my eyes for 15 minutes, that's what I need to do. And, you're driving by yourself, you have a goal at the end of the day, but I just felt like if I take a nap at every rest stop, so what if I'm stopping every 30 miles?
Yeah.
Like, there, again, no prizes. The prize for finishing is your life. So
that is an excellent way to think about that. Yes.
Yeah.
That is correct. I think now that I know more of like what some of my limits are, I can plan a little bit better on the time standpoint, or I just need to, part of my issue, which I also learned on this last road trip, is like I would leave midday for certain things, and I'm like, no, I need to be leaving in the morning, because sometimes I was grocery shopping in the evening and I'm exhausted and I'm crabby, and like I need to honestly apply a lot of the same things I did on my long trip, where I would be moving among places. And I was like, I got to just like stop. It's like I kept kind of jamming more and more stuff in. I'm like, no, you need to stop. Like, this is what you did before. This gave you the most peace of mind. This helped you kind of feel settled and organized when you were going in. Like, go do that again. Like, that worked. Let's do it again.
Yep.
So I would keep that in mind this time and just leave early and be like, this is the only thing I'm doing today. Okay, I know I'm going to get in it on or around time. I've got to be good about actually making stops, as opposed to where I was like against time of like, okay, I've got to get going. I've got to move on.
Right.
So there's that. But like, honestly, I was never like a big domestic traveler. Once I started going international, I just always went international.
Yeah.
And so, it's been kind of a nice change of pace to be like, oh, I think I'm actually kind of like excited about things to see and do around the U.S., whether I drive or whether maybe I have to fly and rent a car. It's been like a very interesting kind of change of pace. But I think that's also what a lot of people were doing as part of the pandemic, where especially at Christmas time last year, when everything was changing and closing down again for a bit, this winter, I'm going to do an international trip in fall, and then I would go somewhere over like the holidays again, but I'm going to stay domestic. I mean, it's not the same. I mean, who knows? No one knows anymore, but it was really stressful trying to cancel out that stuff at Christmas. And it's like, I met a lot of other people who changed international plans because they had to.
Yep.
And so for me, it's like, no, maybe I just got to kind of rethink about how I do some of this stuff. And if I have the ability in which to work during the week and then go explore on weekends, I just got to be a little more intentional in my planning. But it's been nice to have something to be excited about, like really kind of get more excited about domestic travel and things to do as opposed to international. And so that was like a really big change of pace for me.
Yeah. And you're going to Colorado, which has Hatch green chilies. I'm excited for the food you're going to eat. I lived in Durango, Colorado for 3 years.
Okay.
Which is the southwest corner. So if you take a long weekend, the thing about Colorado that was wild to me coming from the Midwest is that, so Durango was still like a 6-hour drive from Denver.
Yeah.
And in the same state is how far away things still are. But if you get down, if you take a long weekend and go down there, Durango is one of the towns you might stay in to go to Mesa Verde.
Okay, I'll have to look this up because there is one hike I really want to do for my birthday. So I'll be there over my birthday, and I want to go out to, I think it's Gunnison National Park within there. So that when you're talking about the southwest corner, it is like kind of in that area, I think. And so that's like a weekend thing. But yeah, it's still going to be like 4 hours from where I am. But it was kind of like being intentional about, where do I want to be and what do I kind of want to do and what's the most central. But it's going to be, I think, a different and interesting kind of experience. And then I'm thinking about for the holiday time, at least right now, and who knows what that'll look like, go out to like Joshua Tree, and I want to see the other side of the Grand Canyon over by like over by like Nevada, like Vegas. So have just been kind of like kicking around that, but will kind of depend. I mean, unfortunately, with this influx of domestic travel, lodging, like, and again, I don't always stay in Airbnbs, but that has been an option as I have to work. I am working during these times.
Yes.
It just, man, it is, that whole market is changing again too.
It is. I'm seeing a lot on TikTok about Airbnb. There's more local, because of the housing crisis, local municipalities are starting to crack down on Airbnb, which I think is good. You know, like the people that have bought up so many spaces that there's not rentals available. And then figuring out, like, how do you make a market of housing that allows for people who are doing work from anywhere, who are temporary residents, who are like a truly small business, you know, like, I don't know. Like, I don't know what the right mix is.
No, I have complicated feelings on that. There's no great answer, to be completely honest. There's like no great kind of solution, especially when you're a traveling person of one.
Yeah. And I think that when you're working from anywhere, it's just nice to have 2 rooms, you know, like the hotel, to be in a traditional hotel, like not a suite, not an extended stay where you kind of feel like you've got a living room. I don't think I could do a month in a hotel room that is, I mean, it's a place of privilege. That's what we're talking about. But like, I have not been in a studio situation in over 20 years. And it would not be for me. I would want a home feeling. I would want 2 rooms. I would want a bedroom and maybe a kitchen option. So that's just me.
For me, I was very adamant that I needed a kitchen, and because in being gone for so long, you know, I can't go out for every meal. So it's like I needed a kitchen. It was really interesting because not many places had an oven, and so I was like, oh my gosh, like what is my backup? So some of it I was cooking on like a hot plate, and I've never cooked on a hot plate before. So that was an interesting experience, but that was like an interesting thing I noticed at the same time was that ovens were not always available. And it would be like, oh, no, like they had a kitchen, but a kitchen was like a microwave and maybe a small sink. And so...
was this in the U.S.?
Oh, yeah.
Or was this in international travel?
No. I mean, I will say I didn't do a lot of Airbnbs overseas. The only time I did them was in New Zealand because it was still pretty cost effective and or the cost of a hotel room. Or sorry, not a hotel room, a hostel room. And so sometimes I just wanted my own space. I will say in hindsight, I told people this and they were like, that seems like not the best decision, but it seemed like the right decision. I stayed in a guy had converted a shack, like a tool shed, in his backyard to be this like kind of studio apartment, but there was no obviously plumbing. And so I just like slept there. And it was my own space. I could lock the door.
Yeah.
I had a bed and a little mini fridge and there was electricity, obviously, but there was just no plumbing. And so I had to like walk into this guy's house to like use the bathroom.
Yeah.
And I mean, it's possible. You just, you know, make arrangements and you think about some stuff. But my friend was like, you slept in a shed. I was like, well, it's a shed, but it's like a adapted shed.
Yeah.
It was $20 a night. Like, again, I got to pick my battles, people. Like,
you had some privacy. Yeah. I don't think that sounds, it's just about like, for me, it would just be like timing showers and toileting.
And 100%. And that's what I did.
Yeah.
But I was like, what do you want me to do? Stay in the guest room with this guy in this guy's house with him there? Like, that sounds like a much worse idea than staying in a shed that I can lock the door on and I can be on my own.
Yeah.
So.
Especially after months of hostels and
people
stuff, it
everywhere.
just sounds like kind of, if you said, yeah, I'm glamping.
Yeah.
With access to to plumbing, people would think that's great. But then you're like,
Oh, it's in a shed.
I'm sleeping in a shed.
Yeah.
No, you were glamping.
Yes, thank you for helping me PR spin that. That is much better messaging. And I will say, I did stay in a hostel. I actually thought of you when I was doing this. I was in a hostel in Edinburgh. And it was a pod hostel. So the pod hostels are kind of, I guess, what it sounds like. You have a pod, like a little bed. You know, there's a bed. There's space for you to put your stuff along the side. You can close a curtain, to give you a sense of privacy. You have a locker still like underneath or off to the side. I had overall like a great experience there. Like it was the right hostel for me. The pod totally worked out. That was great. The thing I will tell you that got kind of old, which I don't know if this bodes well for me if I do a long form trip again, is I got kind of tired of like spooning with my backpack, like my day backpack, because it didn't fit in the locker and I didn't want to leave it out because it had things like my wallet and other things that I would keep like at my head. Boy, I get really tired. I got kind of tired of like the backpack being my big spoon while I'm trying to sleep, and it's like snuggled up against my back, or I'm spooning it, like whichever way you want to go. And the other thing is I did wake up once, and this normally does not happen, which is very odd. And I woke up once in a panic because it felt like I was in a coffin. Yeah. Like because it is also part of the thing with the pod is like it is an enclosed space outside of this curtain. So if you are claustrophobic, it takes some getting used to. Yeah. And so I was like, this place worked out great. The amenities were really nice. The location was perfect. The price was right. All of it was like worked out well. I just kind of hit my limit of, man, I really don't want to spoon my backpack anymore. And I really don't want to wake up feeling like I'm in a coffin, because that did happen once. And I was like kind of startled. Like it just had been a while since I flexed that muscle.
Yeah. I stayed at I used to stay at the Pod Hotel in New York. Okay. But that was more, it was a tiny room with like 2 bunk beds. And if there were 2 people in the room, it was because you brought the second person, you weren't matched with people. And then it was a shared bathroom in the hallway.
Okay. That sounds
so
nice.
It was a tight space. Yeah. But you had a sink in your room, so you could brush your teeth and wash your hands in your room. And I did that a few times in my late 20s, early 30s for sure.
Having the sink in the room would be great. That would do a lot to just sort of give like somewhat still that sense of privacy. Yeah. The thing I know we're kind of like wrapping up. So here's what I would say. Like I thought on a very profound note on my last one. And so the lesson that I continue to learn as I get older and I travel is quality of life. So my dad used to tell me that all the time when I would be super cheap on things like in Chicago, and it was like, oh no, I got to save this like $2 or $3. I was like making a point. And he would say that, and it never really like sunk in. And so it wasn't until I got a little bit older, I had gone through some of that job transition stuff and gone through sort of various other life experiences. And suddenly I'm like all about this quality of life thing, or like, for example, just sometimes throwing money at the problem. So when my tour ended in Amman, I had 2 nights still before I flew to Edinburgh. And it was like, great, I could go around kind of at my own pace. I didn't have anybody with me. And, I could just like go do my own thing on my own schedule. And I was going to move from the hotel we were staying at in Amman as part of the tour to a hostel kind of closer into the old town. And then I didn't. Like, I was like, I don't think I actually want to do this. So I ended up staying at the hotel, like 2 extra nights. I was with my roommate for 1 more night. So the tour ended and she was flying. She had 1 more night there. And so she just let me stay in her room for free. We got along so well near the end of that like she just let me stay 1 night for free. And then I just had to pay for 1 night on top of that.
Perfect.
And I ate the other cost of the hostel, which was like $20. Again, it's so much cheaper at that side of the world. Yeah. And I was like, nope, that is called my quality of life. This is why I work in corporate America. And sometimes that is worth my sanity. And so I do that. Then I'm getting ready to leave London. And I'm not sure if you have heard on the news, London or the UK is struggling with a lot of the same issues we are here in inflation and people wanting that reflected in their paychecks because cost of living on top of cost of goods is so high. Well, one of the things that has come up as part of that is that the train workers are striking.
Okay.
And if anyone has been to London, the city lives on that underground. If that underground goes out, that is a big deal. So
Yeah.
I was there for Jubilee weekend. I was flying. So that weekend obviously ended on a Sunday. I was flying out Monday morning. And here's what I didn't know, that there was a strike on Monday morning.
Oh.
And my hotel knew that and just like kind of didn't say anything. I don't think it was, they didn't intentionally not say it. I was like, that is something that would have like been helpful to know. Now, would it have changed anything? Probably not. But it just like, I didn't want to be getting up and finding out, oh my God, all of the underground lines that I need to take to the airport are not working.
Are gone. Right.
How do I even get out there? And it's, I got to check out, and then now I'm running late and leaving. And so I had loaded up my Oyster card, the transit card in London, to have enough money on there to get to the airport. And I ended up just not even taking it because there was no underground to take. The stations were like closed, like gated off.
Wow.
So I somehow find out that I have to get to Paddington Station to get on the Heathrow Express, which is one of the only lines that is like privately owned, so it's not affected as part of this.
Okay, so it's
strike.
still running.
So that's still running.
Okay.
And that's the only
Thank
place
God.
I can get on there to get out.
Yeah.
So in the rain, so it's raining, which is
Perfect.
Just what I needed.
So British.
Just what I needed on the day I'm leaving where there's a strike. So I panic and I call an Uber, which I won't even tell you how much that cost because I just had to go dead inside and hit book because I had no other option. I couldn't walk to Paddington Station.
No.
If I could have, I would have. So quality of life, also necessity. Necessity, but also quality of life. I paid what that Uber cost, which was ridiculous, to go 10 minutes to Paddington. And then I had to pay, I think it was £25 for the Heathrow Express to get me out to the airport. And the whole time, I am just annoyed. I am pissed off paying for this thing because I have a transit card that should work.
Yeah.
And there was actually one line, the new line, the Elizabeth line, which opened this year. And the Queen did go to open, named in her honor.
I saw her.
She was there for that.
From that,
that was also the only real tube line running because they were also recently negotiated with contract because it was the newest to open, and so that was running. But that, was not leaving for another 35 minutes from Paddington. And I'm like, I just have to buy this ticket, and I was super pissed off, riding that train out there because it cost me, I don't know, $60 to get out to the airport when it should have cost me like $5. And I was annoyed, and it's raining, and I'm wet, and I'm like trying to leave, and my ankle is throbbing, and I need to just be off my ankle for multiple hours. And it just was like, you know what? Quality of life, I got to get it done. And so I'm throwing money at the problem to make my life better. And so that is now, in certain situations, what I try and keep in mind. I know not everyone is maybe as fortunate in which to do that, and sometimes there are not the times in which to do it as well. I don't do it every time, but there are just times where sometimes you have to throw money at the problem to make it go away.
Yeah.
Even if it's annoying, which this was.
Yes.
And I'm still annoyed. And I lost the ticket from the Heathrow Express, and I don't know how that happened. I've checked like all my pants, I've checked all my jacket pockets, so I didn't even get to keep that as a souvenir, which like felt right. Yeah, that felt right.
Yeah.
That felt right. That felt like how that would end. So I have a picture of me holding it on my phone because I was so pissed off.
Right.
And of course I lost. I'm going to find it like 6 months from now. I will just like be randomly doing something and it'll probably appear.
Yeah.
But yes, I would say one of the hardest lessons I've had to learn as an adult is when to throw money at the problem. Because sometimes you don't have it, and sometimes you're not going to get much out of it. But in the situations where you can, and it will make a difference, do it, because I lived way too long suffering it out for like a nominal amount of money that in the end would have made my quality of life significantly better.
Yeah. It's a good lesson because you plan, you make the plan, you plan within your budget, and you have an emergency line for a reason. And that sometimes it's just like, I have to stay at this hotel. I've got to cancel the plan to go stay with a friend because that happened to me on maybe like 2015 when I was in Israel, where I ultimately it got diagnosed as uveitis, but like my eye thing started on that trip. And I was like, I got to stay at this hotel another night. And it was one where I had stayed in like lower budget hotels.
Yeah.
Got my hotels.com credit and then used that hotels.com to like stay at a luxury hotel for a night. And my rewards. And then I wound up having to like cancel going to a friend's house and staying there and going to a hospital. But yeah, it was like, you're just going to have to pay for this luxury hotel because you're too sick to change rooms or whatever. You got to take care of yourself first. And that means changing your budget a little bit. So
yes, I totally agree with that and can empathize with it as well. I mean, without going into another therapy session, I have very deep seated issues with money, and I know always when they're going to come out. Like there's definitely triggers in which I bring those up. And I will say the first thing I always do when I start to get kind of like triggered on those things is I just lock down like all my spending. And so, I didn't really want to spend the money that I had to get out to the airport because, I had gone out to eat a little bit more. I had kind of, purchased a few more things than I was not anticipating. And I was feeling, I think, a little bit like in my out-of-pocket tracker, which you may remember from our old days in agency. Yes. I had a lot of out-of-pockets like going out and kind of just more than I was anticipating. And I was kind of just like feeling uncomfortable around that. Yeah. I felt that way even a little bit about the hotel. But I think I've become better where, when I lived in Chicago, because I was always saving to travel, I didn't really spend a lot of money. I lived very, very cost effectively because I was always saving for something more, a variety of reasons. Yeah. And I remember when I got laid off from the agency that you and I both worked for, I was having dinner with a friend of mine who had transitioned from working at a big agency to kind of owning her own business. And she was saying, how dramatically her paycheck had dropped like in the interim. And she was saying, I wish I had not kind of spent the money I did when I was working in an agency of like, buying that extra watch or buying these other things because, now let's say her salary got cut by like 60%. Right. She's adapting on that and maybe didn't have the reserves. And I looked at her and I was like, yeah, I think I'm the exact opposite. Like, I never spend money on anything. I never really take care of myself and, reward or things like that. So I said, I'm trying to actually be better about that because I never did that before. So I was like, I was in the complete opposite. Yeah. And I think about that now, and I actually want to reach out and kind of tell her that, like, where I really took that conversation to heart and thought about it more. And now it's always sometimes like the slippery slope of when those situations come up. So like, when that happens, sometimes I know when I get back, I just kind of got to chill out a little bit more or kind of like watch it, but
do some meal planning, on the back end,
just kind of lay low, go for walks or whatever else, which I will hopefully be able to do again shortly. Yes. And yeah, the quality of life thing, I just was like, I cannot go to that hostel. Like, I just was very direct. I was like, I'm not going to that hostel. I will eat the $20. I will stay, and I will pay like, it was $60 at this hotel. Like, I just, it didn't even enter my mind in which I was going. I truly was like, I cannot believe I did that. I was like, oh my God, look at me. Quality of lifing it.
Yes. Yes. So Jessica's dad, I hope you're listening. She's learned the lesson.
I do tell him that individually, and I do not know if he will listen. And
did he listen to the first episode?
I don't know.
Okay.
I mean, I checked in with him before I talked to you last time of like, hey, this is kind of what I'm going to talk about. I'm going to mention you. Are you comfortable with that? And he said yes, because it was kind of an integral part of what we were discussing.
Right, and the PowerPoint.
And I will tell him, I was like, man, I just totally quality of life and did this. And I will say the thing, too, I've learned in getting older and having a different relationship with your parents as you age, and they age as well, is a lot of stuff I was told is like in my 20s or maybe in my 30s that I was like, you don't know what you're talking about. Like, I don't understand what you're saying. Most of it is correct. And it just didn't didn't come to me until later in life. And so I think about that. The quality of life thing was a big one. And looking at how you structure your day and ultimately like then how you value your time. Yeah. And I didn't really learn that lesson until after I was unemployed for a little bit. And suddenly, something would go wrong, but I'm like, oh, it's like 10 a.m. Like I still got the whole day to make up or kind of like move beyond this. But when you're working and let's say you only have 3 hours at the end of your day, you know, half hour, 45 minutes is you're ticking off a lot of that time.
Yeah.
But I also am privileged enough where I can work from home where again, like that time, the meaning of time, how you apply that time and where you assess and put that time elsewhere has also shifted again. And so it's always just interesting how these like lessons and things I was told at various stages of life that I should have learned earlier come back and do come around later on.
You learned them at the right time.
I learned them at a time where I was more comfortable taking action on them. Let's say that, where I could actually apply and do those things. And I acknowledge my privilege in many areas related to being able to throw money at the problem sometimes, you know, depending on what it is.
Yes,
and
right.
Where I can work from, you know, I acknowledge all of my privilege associated with that. So I'm trying to have a better quality of life at times than I sometimes subjected myself to earlier in life.
Awesome. Well, Jess, do you want people to follow you on the internet?
I'm always on the internet, for better or worse. I'm always spending time on Instagram. So yes, I would say, so it's at BAY and then J for Jessica and B for my last name. And yeah, that would be kind of where I spend my most time.
Great.
Been slowing down a little bit now. We've had kind of some stuff going on at home that has taken my time elsewhere, but I always just like to share, and people are usually pretty responsive, and you know, you can follow all the weird stuff I do there and share, and always respond to comments as much as I can. Not that I get a ton. You know, I'm not an influencer. Let me be very clear. But like,
and if people have Colorado recommendations, they should
please send them over.
Send them your way.
Yeah, I'll start sharing that as we kind of get closer.
Yeah.
And see, and you know, you're not gonna get to do everything, but it's kind of like I got a couple of key things I'd like to do when I'm out there. Like I got to look at what's at Red Rocks and a few other like experiences I'd really like to have. Yeah,
my friends that have gone, it's supposed to be such an amazing venue. So
it looks great. I've had friends who went to, and they said it was a great experience.
Yeah. And it seems like, I don't know what their schedule is like, but you know how like Ravinia is super fun in Chicago.
It is.
And that even if you're seeing, I don't want to say just the symphony, it doesn't have to be the greatest rock and roll band in the world for Ravinia to be a nice night. So, and I suspect that Red Rocks is the same way, that it could be like if the Denver Symphony is playing, that is probably a nice experience as well.
But Ravinia is a good experience. I think also taking the Metra out there is like part of that experience. So I only ever went out to Ravinia by taking the Metra. And it is, you know, it can be hit or miss, especially on the way back, after people have had copious amounts of alcohol over the course of the evening. I will say I took the Ravinia train once and there was a party foul. And that someone vomited on the train car at some point. And you could see, unfortunately it was not in my car, but you could see everybody like hoarding out of this car into the others.
Yeah.
So yes, Ravinia is also a great setting. I've gone to many random shows out there, but it is really the experience of getting out there, carrying all the stuff, picnicking, rushing to get your blanket in a spot, and always had a great time out there too. So I'm hoping Red Rocks will be the same. And I'm just kind of going to look and see who's there and be like, okay, even though it's not someone I'm super excited about, it's more just to be there for the experience.
Yeah, that'll be great.
Yeah.
Awesome. Well, Jess, have a wonderful Sunday afternoon.
Thank you. You as well. Thank you so much for your time. And let's see, I've got to go peel some sweet potatoes and kind of finish up a couple of cooking things before I dedicate more time to my book. I had 5 library books come in.
Thank you for listening to Finding Favorites with Leah Jones. Please make sure to subscribe and drop us a 5-star review on iTunes. Now, go out and enjoy your favorite things.